And we are live. So, welcome to episode 145 of An American Werewolf in New Jersey. I am the American Werewolf. In the house tonight, we have some returning guests and friends of the show. We have the Walk to Cinema podcast. G and Caitlin joining us tonight. So, thank you for stopping in and shooting the breeze once again.
Pleasure.
Yeah, and all the way from non-swinging London, we have MorganScorpion herself, Julia Morgan, stopping in again to discuss some Universal monsters. So thank you for taking the time. You're a night. It's 1 a.m. there. But
yes.
You're a night owl. You're a night owl. So
I'm a night owl.
Yeah. So this is okay for you. And I think I've told you before, we have another friend, Marty, over in Dublin. And so, yeah, these are his prime operating hours. So, it's okay. I'm like, if somebody were to ask me to do a stream at 1 a.m, it would have to be a pretty important stream, for me to, start at 1 a.m. But I appreciate you guys always taking the time to come and hang out a little bit. So thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Always. That goes for all of you. The Halloween season is upon us. We've done a couple of streams for Halloween. I covered what that awful Werewolf by Night, some of the new releases, and the new Hellraiser, which I actually enjoyed. And then was that all we've done? I feel like last week I had Sydney. Sydney was supposed to be on here tonight too, from Cinema Cities, and we discussed the old Val Lewton RKO classics, the Catwoman, Cat People, and the Curse of the Cat People. And the Curse of the Cat People I had never seen before. And I did something I rarely do. I actually rented it on Amazon because I thought I had access to it, but I didn't. So it was $2.99 rental, no problem. And it may be one of the best movies. It may have quickly moved into my top 5, which I think G was making fun of.
No, I wasn't making fun of it.
He's like, I was cooking some food. I didn't pay any attention to it at all. And I'm like, I'm going to kick you out of the stream. So there, how about that? No, I'm just kidding.
I wasn't making fun. I do love that movie too. I wouldn't put it in my top 5, but
it wasn't what I was expecting, and in contrast to Cat People, it was completely, it wasn't at all what I was expecting, and it was just this beautiful movie. It's almost like a Christmas movie, and what Val Lewton was doing was so different than what we're about to discuss, that I was just kind of blown away by these, intellectual, psychological horror films, whereas these that we're about to get into are much more based on the literary classics. You've got Shelley's famous book here, which might actually be a better read than Dracula, because Dracula is an all-time favorite of mine in terms of a good read. But I mean, it's just, these are incredibly brilliant, and they're so damn on the nose. I just watched them like right before we went into the stream, because I've had a hellish kind of week in terms of time availability, and they're just so damn good. The ability to emote through the screen in this very basic way, because talkies or talking film was such a new thing back then. But to this day, almost 100 years later, incredibly effective. And I'm talking about James Whale's Frankenstein and The Bride of Frankenstein. So if you guys are ready to go, shall we get it going?
Oh, yes.
All right, boogie woogie. So I'll start out with you guys. Give me some initial thoughts on what you saw. I mean, I assume that you watched it before this because it's not
Mm.
something you watch every day.
I watch it
So
every year though.
it's worthwhile. So go ahead.
Yeah.
Give me some initial thoughts
I mean,
overall.
it's just so good and so classic. I don't think it gets much better than this, even today, for horror movies.
Hmm.
I always love this. I don't watch one without the other either, so I don't even know how to separate them because we're gonna talk about them individually. But it's hard for me because I've never seen Frankenstein without watching Bride of Frankenstein right after.
Right, because the two are the entirety of the story. The
Yeah.
two movies are the entirety of the story. Caitlin?
Yeah, it's a lot sadder than I, originally think of Frankenstein. And I watched these two movies for the first time last Halloween or like last October. Um, but before that, I had seen some other iterations of Frankenstein movies, like I Frankenstein or
Oh
Young
yeah,
Frankenstein, like
okay.
all these other ones that are kind of more either more serious or more goofy.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just they're a lot more, I'd say, developed. This is a lot more developed than some of the other, newer modern iterations.
Okay. Yeah. Julia?
Well, I was a bit dismayed at the first time I saw them. I was 11 or 12, staying up late to watch these movies on TV. It was back in the day when Britain only had 3 TV channels,
I remember
and you
that.
got horror movies once a month if you were lucky. And I saw them again in my 20s or 30s, and now I'm 61. So it's been a huge period of time has passed since I last saw them.
Okay.
Seeing them again, I was dismayed to find that they weren't nearly as good as I remembered them being.
Okay.
And there was not nearly enough Boris Karloff and far too much of everybody else.
Colin Clive and yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was dismayed to find that on the whole, I do not like these movies. I
Okay.
like Boris. I like the mad scientist where they've got all the gadgets and the flashing electricity and the platform rising, that was brilliant. Dr. Pretorius in the crypt with his little altar of bones, drinking and smoking. That I loved. But so much of these movies bored me, irritated me, struck me as crass, and also as incredibly unjust. Because Henry Frankenstein, not Victor, Henry, that threw me. Henry Frankenstein does not get his comeuppance.
No.
He gets the happy ending.
Yes.
That's
And
right.
he doesn't, if anybody deserved to die in a fire in a windmill, it was him.
Yes.
But no,
Absolutely.
he gets to live happily ever after with his girlfriend. Both
Yeah,
of them.
I wonder, and I agree with you, and because my overall impression from watching this, I was infuriated, and I was definitely Team Karloff, if there is such a thing. I just wanted I wanted Karloff to strangle Frankenstein. I wanted him to strangle that other doctor in the first movie. I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
I can't either.
I wanted him to strangle Dwight Fry. I wanted him to strangle all of the villagers. I just wanted him to strangle everybody.
To strangle, Connor.
Yeah.
Oh, she was so irritating. She must have been a big star at the time because she's got that kind of intrusion feeling that she doesn't really belong in the movie at all. But
it's definitely, that's what I mean.
I can't read what I've written.
I don't know if it was their intention to elicit that kind of response, and that, you felt empathy and sympathy for Karloff, because he's so childlike. He's like, it's not like, and I like this interpretation, De Niro's interpretation, where he's very much like the monster in the book. This tragic but also hyper intelligent, extraordinarily articulate, super strong, vengeful kind of thing. He's like a demon, You know, he's like, no, you're going to make this right. Karloff's interpretation is very infantile, you know, and he's very innocent and trusting. And, you know, it's just kind of awful to watch it play out, what continues to happen to him throughout the whole thing. I don't know if that's what James Whale had in mind, or if he intended you to see Karloff as a frightening type of thing. And so I don't know if, you know, in the 30s, audiences would have been prepared for something so dark as to see what Colin Clive really deserved, which you're right, is to burn in a fire, and, you know, the monster go off somewhere and just, you know, kind of live. I don't know if 1931 they would have been ready for that.
There is a callousness throughout the first film that is kind of shocking. There is a character called Victor, and that is the male friend of Elizabeth. So there's a red flag. You know? But
he's just a friend.
He says something like, where are the words? I want to find the precise words, because I did write them down, regarding the medical experimentation, which it's an open secret. Frankenstein is not keeping a secret what he's doing. His lawyer knows, his wife-to-be knows.
Yeah, everyone's in on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Now, he said something, what are the lives of a few dogs or rabbits, says Victor, when he hears about Frankenstein's medical experimentation. So, nothing in his mind whatsoever thinks there's anything wrong with torturing animals or killing animals in the name of science.
Well, no, because I mean, he is the best man at Frankenstein's wedding, and at the same time, behind Frankenstein's back, he's trying to pick up Elizabeth.
Yes, so maybe it's not surprising that he shows no moral compass, because he doesn't have one. Yeah,
there aren't many people here in the movie with a moral compass. Now, I'm going to try something, and I've seen people do this for the past 10 or 12 weeks. I'm going to see if I can bring this into the stream, because I've got it on DVD, and I'm not going to play the movie, but I'll move it through stills, and we can kind of go from there. And you can see, I mean, there's Dwight Fry, and I guess what Whale is trying to show, like, these are not good people. These are ghouls. They're ghouls.
Yeah.
They're robbing graves. They're hanging outside of funerals, and people are weeping and mourning their loved ones. And there they are, hanging outside like a couple of monsters.
Yeah.
Just waiting to dig. So I'm assuming that, you know, Whale is not trying to show you something sympathetic from these people, and Dwight Fry certainly not.
Yeah.
It's a kind of science. It's a God complex, but there's no humanity here.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I mean, in that it's just such a raw interpretation. Like, if you look at it 60 years later when Brana tried to do it, there's a lot more humanity. It's almost like a bumbling kind of, I don't know what, that leads him to do this. It's an obsession, but he never loses, you know, I don't know what it is that makes him a person. You get the impression that these people here don't have it to begin with.
Yeah.
Go, if anybody wants to jump in, I'm going to move this around a little bit, but please just jump in as you see fit. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
We're waiting for the next slide.
Oh, well, I'm just moving here, and, you know, they're digging up. I mean, this is, you know, desecration. It's blasphemous.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're not robbing. I think I don't remember if in the book, does anybody remember, was he robbing cadavers from like the university? I don't know. I don't remember.
He robbed the brain from the university.
In the
Here's
book?
the thing, is that it says very clearly on the jar that this is an abnormal brain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Fritz takes it to Dr. Frankenstein, and Dr. Frankenstein doesn't seem to be able to read labels. You'd think he'd say, this is the wrong brain, go back and get me one that isn't abnormal. No,
Well,
he just uses it.
well, I mean, they're digging
Either way,
coffins.
he makes him a pretty crap scientist.
Yeah, well, they're digging coffins out of the ground.
Mm.
You know, they're taking hanged men and you know, cutting them down. These are awful people.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure, and I think it's most accurate what I said in the beginning. You know, these are actual ghouls. You've got Dwight Fry, and Dwight Fry is really, and I shouldn't take away from the quality of the performance, because Colin Clive he's great playing a ghoul.
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, you know, acting
Man
styles
is a box of frogs.
Yeah, I mean, acting styles must have changed a lot from, you know, 1931, but I mean, he's effective as hell even by today's standards. You know, he's a creepy, frightening, you know, he's almost like this insect, you know, this like single-minded kind of thing going on with him. And it's very disconcerting. And like, I'm trying to figure out how he's got this pretty fiance. You know, I'm like, what the hell does she see in this guy? You know, this guy is digging up graves. You're like, what the? This is like something out of Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah.
Well, maybe she sees the title he's going to inherit once his old man dies.
Okay.
Nice big castle, loads of money.
Yeah.
That's entirely possible. You know, she could be in love with the money. I mean, but they're awful. One of the things though I did enjoy, but you know, they're cutting these down, and then you queue up to, I mean, just, you know, they're talking about the brain and, you know, the frontal cortex where all the higher order thinking is happening, and you know, in the criminal brain they're not, you know, seeing that kind of development. And I don't know this actor's name, but he was the guy who played Van Helsing in Todd Browning's Dracula. So we'll talk about
Eric Van Sloan.
Okay, so we're going to see him tomorrow playing Van Helsing. But it's interesting in that they're talking about this criminally minded, you know, this criminal brain that, you know, we know is going to go into the monster. But at the same time, they don't, at least by, this is what I mean, you know, maybe this is what James Whale thought. I didn't really see the monster as, I didn't see Karloff as a criminal.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, I think in other iterations that I've seen, you know, when they put the criminal brain, that's what makes the monster so scary and like just has this like incredible brute force to it, is the fact that it has the abnormal brain. But with this, it definitely feels like it didn't really matter that it had an abnormal brain. It's still like he was just born that day and is experiencing the world kind of brand new. You know?
But there's also, you know, different types of criminals. Doesn't necessarily mean he's aggressive, I suppose. But it would imply that, I would agree.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they're clearly not. Well, at least that's not what I picked up on. That's not what there are different types of criminals, and sure, maybe that does mean that he does have the capacity for violence.
Well, look what's just happened to him. He's come out of, you know, wakes up on this table, no recollection of what happened before. Strange men. He's been tortured. He's been imprisoned. He's been tortured with fire. They're intending to vivisect him. You know. You could say that he has a very severe case of PTSD. That might explain the violence, because let's face it, against his captors and his torturers, his violence is completely justified.
Yeah.
You know, he's doing what it takes to get away from these monsters.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, also with what Caitlin said, and that's, you know, I mean, these things are, it's just, it's very strange in that it's not the type of Frankenstein that you're used to seeing. I mean, these people are just like, everybody's just awful in this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They're all just kind of awful. And there's Victor and Elizabeth, and he's the best man at, Victor at Henry's wedding, but, and he's delivering this news, but, at the same time, if he can, sneak in the back door with Elizabeth and try to steal her,
Oh, yeah.
he's going to do that too. One of the things we talked about when we talked about Browning's Dracula too, was the overacting. Did anybody else pick up on that?
Wouldn't have been seen as overacting at the time.
Yeah.
No,
They're coming off of the silent films. They're kind of learning as they go.
Yeah, but I just find that kind of funny, because everybody's used to this, sort of over projected kind of thing that they have to do in silent films, because there's no dialogue. But here, maybe 5 years later, they're able to talk for the first time, but the acting styles kind of haven't adapted. So
But actors
like
at the time, most of the actors at the time would have trained in theatre acting, where things have to be a little bit larger than life to make sure the people at the back can see. And as a hangover from the Victorian theatre, which I'm no expert on it, but if you ever watch the Todd Slaughter movies, they were acted in the Victorian style, where attitudes are struck to indicate emotions, and facial expressions are over exaggerated again to make sure people can see, and voices are unnaturally loud and precise to make sure people at the back can hear.
Yeah.
And film acting is a very different kettle of fish.
All of the movements, the way people race across the room very quickly, just to talk, if somebody did that, you were like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you running across, I'm right here, but it's effective, but I find some humor in it. Looking at it 90 years later, I think it's funny. It's hard to find any likable characters in this.
The little girl,
Maria.
Yes.
Yeah, you end up liking Maria. She's very sweet. Victor's in the friend zone. He's the best man and all these different things, but apparently, Elizabeth hasn't heard from him in a long time, except to send this cryptic sort of, message. So they all just decide to go marching on the house after they talk to the doctor. Oh, well, yes, he's, and like the doctor just gives him right up. Well, yeah, he's experimenting. And that's where the line came from.
Well, that's because he sees nothing wrong in it. To him, well, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you dig up bodies? Why wouldn't you try to create life?
It's unbelievable.
It's bizarre. It's bizarre, and it was something that I'd completely forgotten about.
Yeah, I mean, it's this very matter-of-fact desecration of graves. Like they just, there's no, maybe they're all psychopaths. Isn't that part of the definition of a psychopath? You don't feel any remorse or anything like that. And so, I mean, these people are they're unbelievable. I mean, he's an asshole. He's trying to pick up his buddy's girlfriend. I'm on the fence with Elizabeth here, and the doctor's kind of an asshole.
I don't understand. If I was if I was engaged to be married, and my husband-to-be's friend started coming on to me, I'd be insulted. I'd be angry. I'd be fucking furious, basically. What do you take me for? Would be the first thing. How dare you? Have you no loyalty? Why she accepts it? Maybe she's got no choice to accept it. I don't know. But
that was my question. Is that a position that a woman would take in 150 years prior? In the late 19th
it would be worse.
century.
You'd think they'd be more strict in their morals, not less.
I'm sure that, probably, I don't think the woman would report it. I don't know. What do you think, Caitlin?
I
Is it just something you would have to grin and bear?
I mean,
I could see that.
I would probably think about the grin and bear it type thing more so, in my opinion. But I'm not an expert on like, the the
19th
morals
century
yeah.
mores. Yeah. Okay. But I mean, and that's kind of her response to it. She kind of like gently, no, 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 we're not having that discussion. She does it, in a very sort of measured way, so his he doesn't get insulted, his pride doesn't get wounded, and at the same time, she kind of gently closes the door. So I think that her position on it is that, she's just kind of going to grin and bear it, but we're not going to go there. We're not, and I'm not going to make a production out of it either because I've got other fish to fry. I can't figure out where my fiance is in the first place. Now, I mean, we're talking, 12 or so minutes into the movie. That's actually quite a bit. There's quite a bit happening already. I mean, it sets it up really quickly. And, the next thing you know, you got, Dwight Fry and Colin Clive, gleefully like glaring at each other. And you can tell that they've gone crazy together in that house. Or in this windmill, he's rented this abandoned windmill, and it's a haven for crazy people. And you can kind of see the contrast, even though you don't like, Victor or, anyone else necessarily. But when they let all these other people in, you can instantly see the contrast and what's happening. And that at least these people, even if they're not, the most moral people, or at least coming from a place that isn't batshit crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like they're at this point they have no reason to believe that Frankenstein is like doing anything that would kind of upend the natural progression of things, like,
of the universe. Yeah, I'm sure they probably aren't there yet.
Yeah. He's literally playing God.
Well, they have been told. They have been told by the lawyer that he's experimenting with the dead and trying to create life.
Yeah,
so,
but I think at that point there's still kind of like, there's no way that he could actually, succeed.
Right.
And even if he does, it's not human beings that they're thinking about, because I feel like at least for a time, like people don't really believe that animals have souls that go to heaven and stuff like that. So like being able to reanimate like a frog or a dog is different than being able to reanimate a human. So I feel like there's still like a disconnect between like what they think is going on and what's actually going on at this point.
Yeah, it would probably be like somebody saying, hey, I'm going to go out and build a UFO.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sure, have fun. I'll see you in a couple. I'll talk. Your buddy comes up. Yeah, whatever, man. Put the beer down. Sure, I'll see you next time. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. And then you actually find out, holy shit, he's, this guy's actually, going off his rocker, because he's gone into this deep isolation, and you can see that, like the way that his face, is like contorted, towards people. I think Henry calls him crazy. Yeah, that look, there's the overacting again. You're inhuman. You're crazy, and he's like, I'm crazy, am I? And he just gives that look right there on his face. And you're like, oh, this guy's going to start splitting people's heads open, with like a pickaxe or something like that. This guy's not in a good place. But, it's different than what most people have, kind of seen in the movies, because he just lets everybody in on it. Which
he's kind of proud.
Yeah.
He is, which is just, to me, an indication of how disconnected he's become from.
Yeah, absolutely.
The rest of the world. I mean, the guy's just gone off the deep end. Yeah, sure, I'll show you the dead body. I robbed all these graves, and it's like a Jeffrey Dahmer. I mean, I just saw that Dahmer Netflix series. It's kind of like that. Yeah, I was robbing graves, and I stitched all these bodies together. I mean,
But he feels on the top of the world because he succeeded. So if
yeah,
you're
I mean,
working on something and you succeed, you would want to show it, even if it's crazy to others. To you, you're so absorbed in it that it's your new normal because that's all you do.
yeah, but I mean, and this is the conversation. I mean, we're talking about this, but if a friend of yours came to you and said, I stitched all these bodies together to create a body, you'd be like, what the fuck? What is going on with these people? Hold on a second. We got some comments here. We got John Alvarez. He says the monster in this movie was Dr. Frankenstein. The creature, brilliantly played by Karloff, is sympathetic because he is innocent. The creature never wanted to be brought back to life. The true creature is Dr. Frankenstein in the film and the book. And if you read the book, if you ever read the book, there's a quote in there from Milton's Paradise Lost, where I think at the end, Satan confronts God and he asks him, did I ask you to make me? I didn't ask for any of this, whatever, whatever your opinion of it, but that's what comes out at the end of the story. I didn't ask you to do any of this. You did this without my permission. I didn't ask you to mold me from anything, and so if there's anybody that's at fault and, that's the devil's case, it's you. But it's just, it's a hell of a movie. And the next thing you know, he's zapping Frankenstein, he's zapping the monster, and, it's alive. And he's going batshit crazy in front of all of his friends and family.
5 minutes after saying that he's sane. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, what did he say? Now I know what it is
to be God.
To feel like
I
God.
know what it's like to be God.
Yeah.
And then he has a seizure.
Yeah.
Just to prove to us how sane he is.
Yes, because God always usually, has a seizure, right there in the middle of, whatever it is he's doing, as the sun is coming up or whatever. And he just looks like straight jacket kind of crazy.
Yeah.
That's the crazy scene for 1931, though. To just mention God like that. It was cut out in a lot of countries.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Until like the 60s, I think.
Can you imagine how this must have scared the shit out of people?
Yeah.
Yes.
They must have never seen any. I mean, because you had Nosferatu, but
They wouldn't have. This would have been very fresh and new. We come to it, well, when I was 11 or 12, obviously I hadn't saw Nightmare on Elm Street or any of those, but we have seen a lot of, I might be presuming too much, we've seen a lot of full-on torture porn, gore, over-the-top special effects. I'm thinking Dog Soldiers, similar movies. We've all seen that. So for us, this looks very tame in many ways. But to somebody who'd never seen Freddy Krueger or Saw, never heard of the word torture porn in the same sentence, to them, it must have been gobsmackingly powerful and shocking.
I'll be honest. This has more of an impact for me. I love Dog Soldiers. I own a copy of it on Blu-ray. I usually don't get into the torturing porn, Hostel, and these Saw kinds of things.
Oh, Hostel was good.
I
speak up for Hostel.
I seen parts of it, and I'm just like, okay, this is just to satiate torture porn fans.
No, you've just seen the selected clips that are meant to shock and disturb you. The whole movie has a very.
You're saying it's an otherwise good. Okay, well, maybe one day.
I'd say that most of the torture that you see in Hostel is so grand guignol. It's funny rather than horrifying because it's extremely unreal. When it does start to get real, they cut straight away from the toe that you see about to be cut off. You don't see the toe cut off suddenly. They cut away and there's screams in the corridor.
Well, I mean, I've seen The Passion of the Christ, so I can't imagine it could be too much worse than that.
I draw the line at that one.
Yeah, so I won't watch Hostel, but I've seen The Passion of the Christ. I went to the theaters to see it, so
Oh, I think you should give Hostel a go. See the whole movie, And
maybe
see,
I'll
if
take a
you're
look.
looking at a morality play,
What
basically.
what I want to see is was it Takashi Miike's Ichi the Killer?
Hmm.
That's
Ah.
supposed to be one hell of a movie. And I'm a big Takashi Miike fan, but I just never gotten around to Ichi the Killer. But my point is that this has more of an impact on me today than watching Dogs. So this is disturbing to me. This is still genuinely because this guy is just batshit crazy. And it's
Well, one of
simplistic
the
and it's
most
90 years
disturbing
ago.
things is that he gets the happy ending, and audiences seem to have been all right with that.
I don't think that audiences were all that sophisticated, and probably a great majority of them that went to the theater probably hadn't read the book. So you're not looking at it in its full context. You're like, if you
But
had
they
put this
still
movie
think
together
that
with Bride,
a grave robber should get a happy ending.
I wasn't there to take a Gallup poll, but I mean, I don't know. Maybe they walked out and said that guy was an asshole, and maybe they agreed with you, like I agree with you. You know, I don't know, but for some reason that was the ending that Whale put in there, and yeah, I mean it's pretty awful. From then on, you know, he's kind of trying to have this, you know, recovery. And the one person I did like in this movie for certain was the father, the Baron Frankenstein, who is just sort of this gruff, but had no idea what was going on. But he was just like this kind
I
of
wouldn't
cranky.
be surprised if he loses his way on the way to the toilet. But
Yeah,
he definitely has no idea what's going on.
He has no idea what's going on, but he did bring some levity, which, you know, there was very little of that in this film. But he's an enjoyable character for me. But I mean, you know, you look. I think I can get away with this. I'm gonna try because I think we're past the copyright stage.
Okay. Hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, that just must have scared. He comes in backwards.
Yeah.
And the footsteps that you hear before he appears. That is building the atmosphere.
Yeah. And it's not like Boris is a beautiful man. He's a powerful face.
Yeah.
His face is still
yes.
the monster of Frankenstein. Like when you think of Frankenstein, you think of Boris's face.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't see De Niro. You don't see Christopher Lee. No disrespect to any of them or anybody else.
I do occasionally see Christopher Lee, but
well, you're over there in the UK, not in America. I love that. I love the Curse of Frankenstein. That's one of my favorite interpretations. But in America, this is the one that we see. It's Karloff, and well deserved. Look at that guy. People must have screamed when they saw that in the theater, and you think it's crazy, you know, or you know, in the way that King Kong must have scared people back in the day. You know, the old one with the original with Fay Wray. But that's just look at that. That's amazing and fantastic makeup job for its time.
I should point out that Boris Karloff had false teeth, and he's not wearing them in this first movie, which gives the more sunken in appearance to his cheeks.
Nice. Now, unfortunately, from here, you know, just the cruelty kind of starts.
Yeah, and I think like it's very like just misunderstandings on both parts because you know the monster's scared of fire. They had no way of knowing that, but because he was scared of fire, he ends up trying to attack his captors, and then they take that as an unprovoked attack. So then it's just
it's pretty obvious that he's afraid of fire, though. They actually use it to try and frighten him back.
But,
but I think it's
pretty obvious what's going on here. They just don't care.
I think that there's still like a miscommunication where I do think that like if the fire had never been included and if like these, all these other things that happened didn't happen, then they might have been able to communicate in a way or like understand that the monster is more childlike than they had initially anticipated. So I think it's just kind of a tragic situations where
These were the days, though, when Down syndrome children were routinely shuffled off into institutions.
that's
Yeah.
true.
So they may not have had any. The fact that the monster is childlike, or what's the word? Educationally subnormal, mentally
Challenge.
handicapped, might not have moved them at all.
That's true.
It didn't move them towards the actual mentally
Well,
disabled
as
children.
as a
they had.
former special ed teacher, the
Mm.
monster clearly has learning differences,
Yeah.
shall we say?
And maybe
But
that's why the original brain, was labeled abnormal.
it's possible, and there's no climate there's no open or opportunities for that kind of thing. But what I got out of it here was that they were, once this thing came to life, something occurred to them something occurred to Frankenstein that hadn't occurred to him before it came to life, which was that he was afraid of this thing.
Mm.
It hadn't occurred to him that he would be afraid of it, and he doesn't know what to do. All these theories and things that he's been talking about and obsessing over, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be known for this and that. And the minute Karloff comes through the door as this enormous, kind of man, with these scars and these eyes, he's afraid, and he doesn't know what to do because he's not God. He's just a man, and he's a stupid man at that.
Yeah.
And so he is immediately, the minute this monster comes to life, he is immediately out of his element. And so he reacts. So he becomes reactive.
Yeah.
And the fire starts, and the ropes come out. And the next thing you know, Dwight Fry is in the back, trying to lash this thing, and it's awful to watch.
Yeah.
And, you immediately lose, if there was any sympathy for these other characters, it's gone now.
Yeah.
It's a grim movie. They lock it up in the, and they chain the door, and, it's just, they're trying to scare it. And yeah, I mean, why wouldn't he defend himself? Why wouldn't he?
Yeah.
It's a terrible story. The book is not a happy book. Has anybody here read the book?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
A long time ago.
If you ever get an opportunity, I mean, I found this copy. If you go to your local bookstore, they've got the Halloween sales out. I found this for
Yes, but
$5.
you can. It's online. It's out of copyright. Project Gutenberg will have it.
Yeah, if you want to read it that way. But in the story, the monster has escaped, and he's chased it all the way to the North Pole, and you're not sure who's chasing who. And so it's this recollection as he finds this. He encountered the doctor encounters this captain of a ship who's obsessed like he was, except with going to the North Pole. He wants to be the first person to go to the North Pole, and they sort of meet in the wilderness while the monster's in pursuit of him, and he relays the story to the captain. And it's kind of like this. He abandons it. He wakes up and he instantly realizes the minute this thing comes to life and he has to address it, that he's out of his depth, and so he just kind of abandons it, and it just kind of makes its own way through the world in a very awful way. The world is not kind to this thing. And yeah, you're right. It is kind of infuriating to see him getting any sort of, TLC here.
Yeah.
It's not great to watch. And wait, hold on. I want to see him strangle somebody. Thank you. Yeah. So now if everybody would simply, fall into Karloff's mitts, this would be a much happier movie. In the same way that I hate King Kong. King Kong makes me hate people in general too. But there is a little bit of range in that you see, and like in the story, like in the book, Colin Clive comes out of it a bit. He snaps out of it and he sort of comes to, and he's not exactly the same anymore. Not that you really give a shit, but he just kind of
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, I
Well,
think it
let's
has to
face
do-
it. He's just written the monster off, hasn't he? He's just yeah. It's no longer important. No longer matters. Forget all about it. He's a
Right, Ken.
complete psychopath, isn't he? Really, he's a complete psychopath.
Yeah. I was saying that the that change definitely probably comes from the fear of his own creation. He really has nothing to blame but himself, and I think he kind of, I don't know, the fear. I personally think the fear of God has now taken over him, where he's like, oh no, like I've created something that I
Yeah.
can't control at this point, and that kind of, I think, shocks him into being a better person, at least at this point. And better person, I mean, like, wouldn't try to
Do it again.
do it again.
Yeah.
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 That's his character in the second film.
Yeah.
And the catch is, because in the first film, in the book, there's no backup doctor to destroy the monster. He just abandons it. And he goes off and he goes with Elizabeth and he lives this happy life for a little while and he forgets about it. And, he locks the book away and I'm never going to do this again. And then the monster actually finds him. So he sort of passes.
In the movie, I don't think we're seeing the better person. I think we're seeing the worst person.
Yeah.
Does dreadful things and then completely forgets about them. And, how can you forget that? How can you just, write that off and carry on with your life as if it hadn't happened?
Well, the other doctor is going to destroy the body. He doesn't know that it's
Well, the other doctor's going to vivisect the monster.
Yeah, he's going, but I think
it's written it in the book. So he's going to vivisect it.
But
while
he's
still alive.
Oh, was he really? I don't remember that.
Yes, most definitely. I remember that.
Okay. Well, so the wedding is taking off and la-di-da, and here comes little Maria. And you do feel bad for Maria because she just wants to, she's so kind, and it's the first kindness that this monster has experienced at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what happens to Maria is an accident.
Yeah.
It is. It's,
Well, he does try to pull her out.
Yeah.
I think he does. Yeah. And he just, throws the flower in and then, she's like, no, put me down. And then he just throws her in. And I don't think he knows what to do, because he doesn't know what swimming is. And that just brings the whole party crashing. Yeah. And then from there, they, go, yeah. Now, in the book, I think initially Victor refuses the monster's request to make him a mate. So what the monster does is he kills Elizabeth. He's like, if you don't, you're not going to get to be happy if you're not even going to try to, fix this thing that you did to me. So he just kills Elizabeth. And it ends up being Elizabeth's body that is the bride of Frankenstein. It becomes her body. That's the bride.
If only they'd made the second movie like that, but no.
Yeah, well, I don't think anybody had the stomach for that.
I think that there's a fine line between reading it in a book and then, seeing it in a movie. And I feel like audiences at the time would not have been as happy, especially because we were talking about how, since they did have to cut out the I am God or, I feel like God out of so many versions that like they probably just couldn't realistically show that, without getting a whole bunch of censors or
they have a template for movies. There has to be a hero, there has to be a heroine. The hero and the heroine have to be happily reunited at the end, no matter what's happened to them in the interim. And I think they were just going with that.
It really makes you appreciate the later Brana's version, because in the book, what ends up happening is he ends up pulling out Elizabeth's heart with his bare hand.
Whoa!
It's just a spiteful kind of murder. that he commits. And yeah, Victor ends up using Elizabeth's body. This is how crazy this book gets, which is amazing considering, I mean, how long ago it was written. This is like something you'd read in a Clive Barker book. But, you know, Mary Shelley, you know, wrote this, you know, 1890, you know, what, 1880 something. What's the copyright on this? And I mean, it's just so,
1816?
No, I don't think it might have been
It's-
that old. I
feel
don't know
like
how old
it's-
it is.
I don't know. 1826. I'll have a guess. I'll have to Google this.
I'm looking here.
1818, according to Wikipedia, 1818.
1818, yeah.
18.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Stoker's book. It's a Dracula that's made later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, it's so damn dark. I mean, it's this incredible piece of work. But I mean,
And the story
I'm
behind
reading
Dulce
somewhere that Mary shagged Shelley for the first time on her father's grave. I'm going to have to look this one up. But you see,
heard it here
Shelley,
first, everybody.
whom she absolutely adored, was originally married to another woman, and this woman committed suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And so then Mary, who was first Mary Wollstonecraft, daughter of feminist writer Mary Wollstonecraft, she then married Shelley and went on to have a rather large number of miscarriages, if I remember right.
She clearly had a dark side. And you know, I guess this is how she got the dark, because this is about as dark as anything you're ever going to read or watch.
Yeah.
And when you consider 90 years ago, there's
Right.
hold on. What?
Mary Shelley lost her virginity to Percy Shelley on top of her mother's grave.
All right, I don't even know what website you're looking that up on.
Oh, several ones.
We're not putting that link in the
notes.
description, Julia. Okay, forget it. Forget it. Not happening. So, I mean, it turns into, you know, at that point, it just becomes a free for all.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're going to hunt that monster down. You know, the fiend must be found, you know, and then, you know, the sort of useless bureaucracy takes over. You know, and they hunt him off into the woods. You know, you're looking at it. This is what happens. And there exists a moment where you really do think that, you know, the monster is going to get Frankenstein, but it doesn't happen. Or, yeah, it doesn't happen. You're hoping. And it ends on in a different way than. Oh, I love this shot. Where there, I don't know if I've got it here. That's all right. It ends with the fire.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a depressing kind of flick. And yeah, I mean the windmill scene is just awful.
Oh yeah.
The windmill scene is just awful to watch.
That was exceptionally well done.
Yeah, it's an extremely well done movie, an extremely well done shot. The performances are top notch. You know, these movies stand the test of time for a reason.
Yeah.
You know, these are timeless performances, and with no dialogue from the monster really. You know, Karloff, I don't think he really has any lines. That comes along in the second movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Do we want to? I mean, it's been almost an hour. Do you guys want to get into the next movie, or?
Oh yes. Well,
Okay.
if the others do, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, we get into that, and I like Elsa Lanchester playing Mary Shelley.
Mhm.
I think she's beautiful. You know, and just really nice to look at. And she's just amongst all those, you know, these sort of flamboyant men that are in the room. she is. Well, I got the impression, at least, that they were playing it that way. She was the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
You know, in her own sort of, you know, not in a not overbearing way. She let them all know it.
Mm.
That, you know, in the
I think it's
opening,
interesting the portrayal of Lord Byron, because I'm wondering, were they trying to code him as gay, or were they just making him very theatrical? Not sure what they were trying to do there.
yes, I think the answer is yes to that. I don't know.
Mm.
No, I mean, again, we talked about this when we talked about Browning's Dracula, in that all of the male actors in Browning's Dracula are extremely flamboyant.
Mm.
Whether it's Dwight Fry playing Renfield, or the guy who plays Harker, you know, or any of these people, they're all just this overacting, high pitched, you know, kind of acting style, and that is part of what made this movie and Dracula so effective. Is that, you know, Lugosi and Karloff sort of become the alphas, you know, in that they steal every scene, because they're just, the presence is just so strong that they don't have to say anything, you know. And I remember Rob Zombie, he was talking about this one time, and he was like, you know, what made them so effective was the contrast with the other men. And that, he said, it was like watching a bunch of closeted gay guys, and then this sort of super alpha male just comes on the screen, and you're just like, holy shit, who the hell is that? You know, and, you know, just end up, you know, taking every scene with them. And we talked about that. I think that was the second episode we ever did, was Browning's Dracula. And it's very similar here. Now, I don't know, you know, what they were doing with Byron or anything, but I really wasn't paying too much attention. I was paying attention to Mary Shelley. You know, just very beautiful, very smart. You know, just came out and told, you know, hey, you know, not everybody wants to have a love story. You know, maybe people need something, you know, just a little bit darker, you know, that kind of thing, you know, just kind of telling them, hey, you know, what I've got maybe is a little more important than, you know, what you're writing at the time. And maybe it serves a less perfunctory kind of need. You know, I'm servicing, you know, another kind of need that people may not be talking about. You know, but for people who, you know, who can acknowledge it, you know, people that if you know, you know, it's almost like one of those types of things. And I just thought she was great. She was one of my, you know, favorite people. One of my favorite scenes in the whole movie was just those first 5 minutes with her in it.
I think the backstory of her writing it is so interesting, and it's been done. Like, there's whole movies just about the night that Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Oh yes, I remember that one.
Is that the one with Gabriel Byrne?
Was it Gabriel Byrne, and Julian Sands played Shelley, and played him very well, if I remember right.
I gotta watch that again. What's it called? Gothic.
Gothic, yeah.
Yes.
It's called Gothic. Yeah, I gotta take a look at that. I got the next couple of days off. Maybe
they
I'll
play it more as a drug trip, which I don't think is what actually happened.
Well, I believe they. I'd have to look this one up, but hashish was around, and opium most definitely existed, and Shelley, I believe Shelley had some flirtation with opium, but I'd have to Google to be absolutely sure.
Well, it probably wouldn't have been much of a stretch to pull some absinthe out of the air, or, you know, something like that. So, you know, these sorts of things, because, you know, these are some pretty far out ideas.
According to various sources here, they would
have a lot of
wine and laudanum. Laudanum, which is opium dissolved in alcohol. So yeah, they would have been tripping out of their box, basically.
Yeah, so her eyes wouldn't nearly have been this clear. They, you know, the pupils would have been dilated a little bit. There'd be some slurring of the words going on. But
if I remember right, the Villa Diodati wasn't quite that big and gorgeous.
Who?
the villa where this
Oh,
Hmm.
well,
Diodati. Ooh, let's
it,
look at
it
it.
is it is a nice set, but the movie essentially. Oh God, I hated Minnie. I hated this woman with a passion.
Yeah.
Oh
She
my
was
God, she
screaming.
was just.
Yeah,
She's
she's
like
like the Ted Raimi of the 1930s.
she's
Yeah,
just like
Denzel
Oh,
everything
loved her.
you know everything you hate about when you would think of the word peasantry. It's
hmm.
just like just
Yeah.
die. Just somebody throw her into the fire. Just get
Yeah.
out. Oh,
Oh,
she
such a
drove me.
poisonous old bag she was as well.
Mm.
Oh, she's
She was
just
on
awful.
the Invisible
Invisible
Mm.
Man.
Man
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
But once she gets her comeuppance and she gets pushed, she just yells more. So you kind of regret punishing her.
That's why you throw her into the fire.
Yeah.
You
Still
don't
feel
Yes,
she can
engage the
yell.
conversation. Just chuck her right into the woodpile.
absolutely.
Goodbye. And
And what the hell does she have on her head? I mean,
this is in you. Oh yeah, I
I'm a
guess
bit of
this
an
is.
alternative dresser, but that takes the biscuit.
I don't know. I do like. I want to go back to this real quick when we talked about Shelley. That she addressed that this thing was a moral lesson. That what she wrote was kind of a cautionary tale, or at least that was the point of the story. That there were some things you're just not supposed to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which, yeah, I mean. I don't know if that gets. This isn't a book that gets addressed very much these days. It's a shame. It's just such a great fucking classic.
Mm.
But yeah, I don't want to look at Minnie anymore. Oh, there she is again.
Well, unfortunately, if you watch the film, you're going to have to look at Minnie
Yeah,
quite a lot.
she's in like every frame. It's and these were two more people I wanted to give, even though it was Maria's parents. I was so disgusted still from the hangover from the windmill fire.
Yes.
That I just kind of wanted everybody to just.
Well, I
drop
mean,
off
there's a bit of a morality they have to go look over the bones, and that's why they get killed. Yes.
Insufferable. Yeah. Now Karloff, Karloff finds the waterways and climbs himself out, and poor. And this is what really made me like these people even less. Poor Mr. Henry. It's like these people just have no clue, like, as to who this guy actually is. Poor Mr. Henry. So
Yes.
Mr. Henry recovers, and basically, time passes. He becomes Baron Frankenstein, and Elizabeth becomes the Baroness. They both got a little PTSD. I get the impression from what's happened here. But
the poor woman's had such a shock; it's completely changed her hair color.
Well, you don't need a shock necessarily to do that. I mean, I don't have any hair, but I mean, I'm just, I'm sure that's not necessarily the rationale behind the change of color there. And then we get to meet Dr. Pretorius. What do you guys walk the cinema? What did you think of Dr. Pretorius?
Flamboyant.
Wonderful. Wonderful character, wonderful bit of acting, and I've got a little bit of curious information about the actor Ernest Thesiger, because he was quite famous for something else besides acting, and that was miniature embroidery. He used to do the most beautiful embroidery. He was so skilled at it that he ended up doing some embroideries to be exhibited in this Queen Mary, Queen of England at the time, had this doll's house where everything was in miniature. It's an enormous miniature doll's house. It's got like 50 rooms to it. And only the very best miniaturists got their work into Queen Mary's doll's house. And his embroidered carpets, embroidered coverlets and things, doesn't really look the type, does he, to be a...
I was just going to say that's probably the last thing I was going. That's probably the last thing I was going to expect you to
Yeah.
list as his claim to fame,
Mm.
embroidery. If you had actually said, necrophilia or digging up graves, because he looks like somebody you would find in a graveyard with a
Creatures in a
shovel.
little jar.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He looks like the guy from Hammers, Dracula, Prince of Darkness, the guy who resurrects Christopher Lee in the second movie in the Terrence
Oh,
Fisher.
no, what was his
Clive.
name? Philip
The guy,
Latham. Philip Latham. That was the
he looks
actor who
just like
played him.
Philip Latham. To ask me, I'm like, is that Clive from Horror of Dracula? So I don't. This got a little hokey for me in
little.
the
A little.
start, in that
Those miniature dolls. I'm sorry, I hated them.
yeah, that
It's
was
silly.
too
It's
much.
silly. It's
A
you
little
know
silly.
too much silliness in this film.
Go ahead. What did you two think?
This movie's a little hokier, but I still like it. This Doctor is definitely more entertaining. Clearly in a bad way to some people, but
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Continue.
I love both films. They are different, and I don't know. I understand what everyone's saying, but you're not going to change my mind about it being great.
I liked my overview of this movie is that I loved Karloff's performance.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
I loved Karloff's performance. I loved Elsa Lanchester's performance, one as Mary Shelley and then as the Bride of Frankenstein. Colin Clive, I still don't like him very much, but everyone else I found kind of either the story was just it did what a lot of sequels do. It seemed to want more. It just kind of went over the top with things, and they went a little too far, like with the miniatures. And I found that Dr. Pretorius, I thought he was kind of an over the top character.
He is.
They raised the level like for suspension of disbelief. They went a little too far for me.
But the blind man scene in this film, I think, is my favorite Frankenstein scene in any movie.
Yeah. That character was extremely well played. Frankenstein is wandering, and he
reminded
gets
me of St. Francis of Assisi.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, he did. He gets, and you look at this, and it almost is this long suffering thing that's happening to him, and they string him up, and he gets shot, and it's get that scene there if I can capture it again, there, and it's just it's awful what happens to Karloff here, and they're throwing rocks at him, and he hasn't really done anything. His crime is sort of existing. But, he escapes. They throw him in a dungeon and they chain him up, and, he escapes. And, these people that he hurts, they deserve it. I'm not sure. Maybe you can explain this to me. What happened to this little girl? Did he hurt a little girl? Do you remember the one?
A young woman with a couple of lambs sees him by the waterfall, is frightened and falls in.
Right.
And he should have left her to drown. The monster should have left her to drown, because by pulling her out and trying to revive her, sets her off screaming, which alerts the hunters, which result in him being shot, which result in the peasants coming out, which result in him being tied up and chained to a chair. And it's like, talk about, no good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah, he eventually manages to escape, and like G was saying, meets the blind old man. And it's a very powerful performance. Out of all the performances it's that are in this, that flamboyant over the top thing, this is very muted. It's a very muted sort of performance, and that's part of the reason why I think it stands out. But it's just, he makes you feel it. He makes you feel it, the loneliness.
Yeah. He's just like the monster in a way, where he's alone. He has a disadvantage, which he can't see. The monster can't talk. so people don't understand certain things about them. Like when the police walk in and they say, "Can't you see what he is?" And he's like, clearly can't see because he's blind.
Right.
So that's the way he relates to the monster, and I think just a great character overall.
Yeah. And it's very sad because, you know, even if you've seen it for the first time, the way that this world is structured, it's very cruel. It's a cruel world, and you know that this isn't going to last. You know, this relationship, this interaction isn't long for this particular world. And I think it's at this point that Frankenstein, that the monster starts to take on, after he's separated from this man, starts to take on some of the angry qualities that we recognize from the book. You know, he learns to speak, you know, and to say things are good or bad, you know, that he wants a friend. You know, he can drink, he can smoke. He starts to develop more human qualities. And I'll be honest, I found that to be completely believable in Karloff's performance.
Yes, well, he's certainly got a craving for alcohol, hasn't he? So the blind man, having taught the monster to enjoy tobacco and alcohol, hasn't really done him a favor there. Two acquired habits he'd be better off without, especially when we see how Dr. Pretorius puts pills in booze in order to knock him out, and they work awfully quickly. I was quite surprised at that.
Well, I mean, you know, what are you going to do? You know, you got an hour, and I mean, it's amazing how much they do in so little time.
It is.
You can watch a 2-hour movie that doesn't have nearly this kind of impact.
Yeah.
You know, with threads and subplots that go absolutely nowhere. Everything here seems to have a purpose.
Yeah.
And the purpose here is that Pretorius is going to pressure Frankenstein into creating a woman.
Yeah.
And even if and this is not part of the book, but even if he has to use the monster to sort of intimidate him into doing it, you know, because the monster understands that he's been wrong. In a way, he seems to understand that he's been wronged by being created.
Yeah.
That's the offense that's been done to him, you know, and that the world hates him for no reason. He hasn't done anything, but the whole world hates him and wants to hurt him. And I mean, I don't want to get too much into Pretorius unless, you know, somebody wants to, but what ends up happening is they end up creating a woman. And when it goes wrong quickly. Because this was there wasn't much to this really that we didn't see from the first movie. And I thought if there was a scene, well, maybe not, that could have been shorter, but you know, I didn't get much out of all this because I knew it was going to happen. And they create this woman. And it's Elsa Lanchester. And I just thought that this was another fantastic performance. And the look. You know, because aside from the shock of hair, she's still like really beautiful.
I'd like to backtrack a little bit because all the sciencey stuff and the electricity stuff and the raising, I thought that was a far better creation scene than we saw in the first movie. And it's one of the things that I love the most. Maybe the thing that I love the most about Bride of Frankenstein is the sciencey thing is much more dramatic, beautiful. I mean, I just found that, and of course, when the monster throws the man off of the tower, that was quite horrifying. That's the closest I've come to horror, to feeling horrified, I think, in the entire Bride of Frankenstein film.
What I saw from the sciencey aspect, what I was impressed by in both films was the sound. The sounds were between the storm and the electricity going on. And I tried, I mean, even coming out of my sound system, it really kind of grabs you. So I was thinking that audiences in 1931, and in this case, 4 years later in 1935, really must have been, it must have been like sensory overload.
Yeah.
for an inexperienced kind of audience. But I mean, they end up creating, Elsa Lanchester as the bride, and quite unfortunately, she rejects him.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It very much
Somebody
like
should have had a little talk with the monster that love can take time. You can't just leap on somebody. She's only just woke up basically, and all of a sudden somebody's trying to seduce her. You can't blame the poor woman for being a bit alarmed.
I don't
She
think
doesn't
he had
know
a
what
lot of
he's
time
like.
to I don't think he had a lot of time to wine and dine over here. I mean, it's not like he can take her out, and she's going to stay at her dad's house and he can
Oh,
ask
like he can
permission.
talk to her, or show her any of the compassion that he so desperately needed himself. I mean, he is petting her hand, which I thought was quite sweet. And I also thought that her hand looked as if it was still partly made of bones. So I found that quite an intense sight.
Yeah, I think this scene was just like heartbreaking because the monster just wants someone that understands him, and he kind of came close with the blind man, but then that didn't work out. So this was kind of his last hope, I think, at having someone that understands who he is and what he is. And so like the rejection, even though they didn't, the expectations were too high, the rejection itself I think set him over the edge, and was like, if my own kind can't accept me, then this isn't worth being.
And that comes back to Shelley's point, and it's a morality tale in that none of this is supposed to work.
Yeah.
Because it's not something that's supposed to be done in the first place.
Yeah.
There's no aspect of this that's going to be successful. It's all going to be disastrous. It's all going to be painful. It's all going to be ruinous to everyone involved.
Yeah.
And Henry Frankenstein is still going to get his happy ending.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, he does. He does. He gets the girl. He gets away. And one of the things that I thought was interesting, especially in the second movie, it was that the score and the music didn't seem to match at times what was going on in the movie. You could get like an upbeat kind of score, and I'm like, they should be working on something darker. Although, who knows, like we said, maybe audiences didn't have the stomach for something quite that.
Yes, could be.
That much of a gut punch. I mean, when you start with Browning's Dracula, which we'll talk about tomorrow, it's Tchaikovsky. It starts off with Tchaikovsky, and then I remember when we talked about when Hammer did Horror of Dracula, it's that huge score, dun, 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 and the blood is like dripping on Dracula's coffin. So in 25 years, between 31 and 58, they had really learned that we need to start adjusting the music for these types of things to fit. And it already starts off with Castle Dracula, and there's the dragon, the symbol of the dragon on the top of the castle. And you're like, yeah, they've got it right. They're going right for it from the beginning. And it just lets you know right there that, they're not screwing around. Here, they haven't quite got to that point yet. Yeah. And they're still trying to play like this, sort of mellowing kind of music that doesn't fit what's going on here. And unfortunately, what happens in the end is that, he decides he doesn't want to live anymore.
Yeah.
And he just decides to pull the whole house down upon himself.
Yeah.
Upon the both of them. And, that's kind of how it ends.
Yeah.
Not for Universal, of course. I mean, they'd have, I don't know how many, at least 5 or 6 more appearances by the Universal Frankenstein
monster. He survived it.
Yeah, he's the monster. He always survives.
First, Karloff has one more, and then it switches back. It might be Bela Lugosi after that.
I think Bela Lugosi. Yeah, I mean,
when does Glenn Strange come up? I can't remember when he shows up. Glenn Strange.
Hold on. Well, in this, I've got Bride of Frankenstein in 35, Son of Frankenstein from 39, Ghost of Frankenstein from 42, House of Frankenstein from 44. And then we've got Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein.
I think that's when
with,
Lugosi does Frankenstein.
yeah, and I know Bela Lugosi played him at least once.
Yeah, I think it was the Abbott and Costello.
which is just another classic. But I mean,
Yeah.
all of these, they're just tragedies.
Yeah.
Oh,
They're just tragic movies. And to me, I mean, I think this is the one in terms of the themes of tragedy, although we shouldn't underestimate Christopher Lee's performance in The Curse of Frankenstein. This is the one that drives it home the most for me.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally. Really, really solid stuff. Is there anything that we missed that you wanted to address in terms of either of the films? Any points or notes that you took that you didn't we didn't get into?
okay. The graveyard scene where the Frankenstein monster is destroying all of the statues, all of the religious statues. When he gets to the crucifix, he doesn't destroy that. So he pulls back from that. I'm sorry, I just think that's kind of significant. It really sort of struck me.
I was almost tempted to say when they were stringing him up, he's almost in like a Christ-like kind of position,
Yes,
and there's
absolutely.
the angry mob. Yeah.
And over on the Boris Karloff Association on Facebook, which is one of my Facebook groups, there was quite a kerfuffle a few years ago when somebody started pointing this out, the religious imagery. And of course, if Baron Frankenstein is God, then his creation must be Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
But pointing that out caused such a kerfuffle. In the end, I had to ban quite a few people.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
There's still like a lot of censorship issues with Bride of Frankenstein too, with like not wanting to destroy any like religious artifacts in the movie, or get too religious or sacrilegious, I guess.
And Dr. Pretorius brings up the point of Adam and Eve to Dr. Frankenstein to convince him. So that's
it's kind of like another like, oh, you're God, so you kind of created your Adam, and now we're gonna create your Eve, and then we're gonna create like a new like race of creatures. Like that was the goal all along, was to.
And that was kind of that you saw
new.
Dr. Frankenstein kind of like that sounds correct. I might want to play God again.
Yeah.
Which it does kind of.
The difference being, of course, is that we would presume that God isn't hanging outside of funerals, getting ready to run, so it's not it's not the God that most people would probably acknowledge and recognize.
It's a twisted version of
it's pretty twisted. It's pretty evil what he's doing. He's pretty awful, and Julia's 100% right in that he doesn't deserve the happy ending that he gets twice. In the book, what ends up happening is that Frankenstein is pursuing him. The monster has gone north, and Frankenstein's pursuing him to kill him. But as he relates the story to the ship's captain, he just dies. Like he just expires. He's so exhausted that he just dies. And I think the captain comes in and because he doesn't believe him. He thinks he's crazy. And then he comes in at one point after he's let him rest, and the monster's in there. And then I think the monster drowns himself. He drowns himself in the Arctic Ocean. He doesn't want to live anymore either. So, and that's just kind of how it ends. Was there any point that you wanted to bring up, you two? Or did we get?
I'll bring up the point that in the first one, people were more accepting of the digging of the corpse. Well, in the second one, he gets these criminals to do it, and they hate it, and they say it's not even a punishment for murderers. It's so bad and vile that they have to do it.
Yeah.
So that shows an evolution, maybe in culture.
Yeah. Or at least it's a great, sort of exposition, that even they were murderers.
Yeah.
Murderers didn't want to do this. Not like, justifiable homicide or soldiers. These were just straight up killers. And they were like, yeah, we don't do this. This is, there is some honor among thieves. There's a code. Some lines you don't cross.
One of the things that I really like about the second movie is that Karloff gets top billing. Clive is very much the second fiddle in this movie, whereas in the first, he was the star. He was the one we were all supposed to be paying the attention to. And Karloff wasn't even meant in the opening credits of the first one. The monster is just a big question mark.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, this Boris Karloff once said that the monster was the best friend I ever had because it's what made him famous.
Yeah.
It's why we know who he is. And
Go ahead.
come the second movie, Karloff is the star, as he should be.
We talked about that a little bit when we talked about Dracula, and that someone like Karloff, who embraced what happened to him, versus someone like Lugosi, who always sort of lamented being typecast.
Yes.
And fell into depression and addiction, and
Well,
probably early
Lugosi
death.
was a star to begin with. He was a star
On
of the stage in his own country. So
But
this
you-
would have been a big come down for him.
But yeah, but I mean, you look at somebody like Christopher Lee, who is clearly annoyed after a while having to play Dracula so many times, but clearly just coming out of World War II.
He was more annoyed by the quality of the scripts.
Well, they were bad.
That's what that's why in one of the movies he doesn't say anything because he hated the script so much he refused to say any of the words.
In most of the movies, he doesn't say anything. His presence is enough.
Oh yes.
But I mean, he was
And of course
very
Christopher Lee
appreciative.
was a real aristocrat whose lineage is at least as old as the counts, if not older.
Yeah, he was the real thing. But he embraced, that he had been typecast, because he's like, hey, this is life isn't so bad. Oh, gee, I'm starring in my 15th movie. Poor me.
Well, one of Christopher Lee's best friends throughout his life was Peter Cushing, and Peter Cushing had a terrible time of trying to make it as an actor. Extreme poverty. I mean, we're talking extreme poverty, where he and his wife didn't even have enough to eat. And they had furniture made out of orange boxes because they couldn't afford actual furniture. But when Peter Cushing discovered that he was typecast, he said, "Good, that means I'll never be out of work."
Yep.
So I think Christopher Lee might have taken on board some of Peter Cushing's attitudes towards the business.
Those are known as good problems.
Yep.
Okay. Hold on a second. We've got Patrick here from. Are we talking werewolves? No, we're not talking werewolves, Patrick. We're talking werewolves. We're talking Frankenstein. You missed it, man. We just went through Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, the old Universal classics. Okay, so here we are now in this point in the movie, or in the show, where we give the movie a rating. We're gonna give the movie anywhere from 0, 0 being I'd rather bang all 10 of my fingers with a roofing hammer than actually watch this movie again. To 0.5, 1, 1.5, 2, all the way to 5. 5 is like, hey, this is exactly why, they invented the genre of cinema. This is art, this kind of thing. We'll start with Walk the Cinema. What did you two each give your own vote for 2 movies? Yeah, so we're looking at 2 numbers from each of you.
I'm just going to give 4.5 to both. Again, I can't separate them. James Whale did such a good job creating something that's iconic beyond film. It's a cultural thing. He created the image of Frankenstein, even though he didn't write the book. When you think of Frankenstein, you think of what James Whale put on the screen.
Yeah.
And they're just so fantastic and iconic to me. And I love them.
Good stuff. Okay.
I gave the Frankenstein a 4 out of 5. I think it's pretty iconic, and I enjoy watching it, and I think it's more compelling than I had originally thought, before watching it. So I enjoy it. And then with the Bride of Frankenstein, I decrease it a little and I give it a 3.5. I think that there are, like we talked about, there's a little bit of like hokiness to it at some points, but it's still really captivates me in terms of like the sadness and the loneliness that the monster feels throughout the story.
Okay. Julia, what do you got for us?
Well, if we're rating the movie, I'm afraid I have to give Frankenstein 3, Bride of Frankenstein 2.
Really?
If we're
Okay.
talking Boris Karloff, 5. 5.
Okay.
Yeah. What can I say? I love Boris Karloff.
Yeah, he's Boris Karloff and I share the same birthday, so that's always kind of cool. For me personally, I would give the first movie a 5, and I'm not, you guys know me. I'm not generous with praise. I'm perfectly willing to say something, is crap if it's crap. But that first movie, just and how either amoral or immoral everyone was.
Mm.
The strength of Karloff's performance and the hook that Frankenstein actually gets away with it in the end. I don't find that to be a failure. It's infuriating.
Yeah,
it's absolutely infuriating, but I find that to be a strength. Is it disloyal to the book? Yeah, probably. I mean, none of the Universal stories, adhere to the source material all that much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he gets away with it in the end. And, those types of movies that they talk about where the bad guy gets away with it, the bad guy wins.
Yeah.
Kind of make movies better. And I think in this case, that's what happens. In terms of the second movie, I'm stuck somewhere between 3.5 and 4. And I'm probably going to go with 3.5. And this is based on Karloff's performance and Elsa Lanchester's performance. Because she's only in it for about 10 minutes, maybe 7 minutes. She even steals it from Karloff. And that's not easy to do. And when she's on the screen, I'm mesmerized. I'm just like, wow, what's she gonna say next? Wow, what's she gonna do next? When she sees him that first time and that little scream comes out, but she can't quite get her vocal cords to work. I was just like, wow, that's really fucking something.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I didn't care about Dr. Frankenstein again this time. I didn't like Dr. Pretorius all that much. I thought the things with the king and the queen and the arch, I just thought that was silly.
That was
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why it gets a 2. That and Una O'Connor is the reason why it gets a 2. Yes.
Yeah. And then Minnie and the peasantry, and I don't think the point was to elicit contempt, but that's what ended up happening with me all the same. So
but I would like to give a gold star to Ernest Thesiger because I think his performance was chilling, grotesque. Yeah.
He was worse than Frankenstein. He was worse than Frankenstein.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, he was worse. He was way worse. Because, Frankenstein seemed to sort of inadvertently have fallen into this spider hole, and just sort of become his surroundings. Whereas this guy was fully aware of how awful what he was doing. He was conscious like the entire time, present the entire time, and was embracing and sort of dismissing any idea that this was, he was a step, he was even darker than Frankenstein. So that is impressive. But at the same time, it just, okay. So 3.5. I would still stick with my 3.5. That wouldn't bring it up to a 4 for me. Okay. We've been going at it for a little bit. You guys, Walk to Cinema. You want to plug anything?
Yeah, if you're not tired of Frankenstein yet, after an hour and a half, episode 3 of Walk the Cinema podcast is about these movies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. And where can people find your content?
Spotify, Apple Podcasts, just anywhere you get your
Mm-hmm.
podcasts, and YouTube.
Okay. Okay. Under Walk the Cinema. Okay.
Yeah.
Julia, anything you want to plug? Tell people where they can find your stuff.
Yes. So I completely forget that we're supposed to be plugging things at the end. Well, basically, the wonderful people over at Hex Studios are producing a book version of Lord of Tears, their movie featuring the fabulous Owlman monster. So there's a Kickstarter for that. So if anybody is interested to go and look up for Hex, Owlman, there you'll find it. And please pledge so that we can produce this marvelous book and make money.
I'll tell you what, Julia. Sorry, I got a little feedback here. Send me the link and I'll put it in the description.
Oh, fabulous! Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, for me, tomorrow we'll be back covering Karloff's. We'll be back with more Karloff tomorrow, and what I thought was an even more or an equally important performance as he plays Imhotep, the mummy, in the 1932 Universal Classic. And then we're going to be looking at Bela Lugosi and Dracula, and that will wrap up the Halloween season. Well, actually, we're going to do one more thing, and that's on Thursday, but I'll talk about that later on.
Okay.
Hold on a second. We got a couple last second comments here. Guilty pleasure, I Frankenstein. You should feel guilty about that.
I'll have to look that one up.
Boy, that's the one with Aaron Eckhart. Oh God. Elsa was a scene stealer. Nice meeting you, Patrick. I've known you for years. What are you talking about? Yeah, this Sunday on Patrick's. I'll be on Patrick's channel on Sunday as part of the IFC Midnights, and we're going to be covering Hunter x Hunter, which is a fantastic movie with Devon Sawa and Nick Stahl. Fantastic film. Fantastic. I can't wait to do that. That's going to be at 6 p.m. Eastern time, I think, on Patrick's channel. So I'm looking forward to that. Okay. I think that's about as much as we need to cover for tonight. My thanks for your time to the Walk the Cinema podcast for a bit of a later show than usual, longer show than usual. And to Julia MorganScorpion, for staying up to almost 3 o'clock in the morning to talk Frankenstein. I appreciate
Thank you.
And we'll be back tomorrow to do it again. So it's all good. All right, everybody, have a great night. Thanks so much, and take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.